Meanwhile, we're learning much more about the pressure the president had faced to allow this transition to go forward. The New York Times first reported about a meeting on Monday in which White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, White House counsel Pat Cipollone, and Trump's personal attorney Jay Sekulow urged the president to get things moving along. NBC News since has learned that Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, and Hope Hicks also made that case to the president. According to a Trump ally, the argument was, quote, rather than continue to take the massive PR hit, suck it up, don't formally concede, but allow the transition to proceed. The goal was to quell the protests within the GOP, according to our reporting. Let's bring in the lead reporter on that story, NBC News correspondent Carol Lee. Carol, good morning. Good to see you. So we've heard these stories often from the last 4 years where Jared and Ivanka were the ones who went in and saved the republic. How much influence did they have at the end to let President Trump finally say, I won't concede, but let's hand over the keys to the transition to the Biden team?
Well, I think it was just a broader group of people who looked at this moment where Republicans were coming out and saying that the president should let a transition proceed, where you had business leaders, people the president considers allies, saying it's time, Joe Biden is clearly president-elect. And Willie, the thing that they really pressed upon the president was that this was a bad PR look for him, and he needed to, quote, protect his brand. And in order to do that, the argument that they made was let the transition go and have that moving on its own track, and the president can still stay on the track that he's on, where he's not admitting that Joe Biden has won the election, and he can continue with his lawsuits and his unfounded allegations with fraud. He can do all of that, but let this go. And one of the reasons they said that that would be useful to him is because it would allow Joe Biden not to blame President Trump if for some reason something fell through the cracks and something went wrong after he took office, whether it's on coronavirus or a national security issue. So it's really, they cast this to him really in terms of how it's best in the president's interest to do this. And he agreed, at least for now, to let this transition move forward, even though we know that he's continuing to say that there was fraud and he's going to continue to fight this battle and raise money and all of those other things.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about, Carol. So is that going to be the two-track process here through the inauguration on January 20th? On the one hand, we'll let the transition go ahead. The agencies will talk to each other. They'll talk to the transition team. But he's going to continue to go out fighting in a public way and say that there were irregularities, claiming widespread fraud where there wasn't, and still claiming that he won the election right up to the inauguration?
Yeah, I mean, what we've been told, and aides to the president have been saying this for several weeks now, is that he's never going to formally concede. They don't even use that word. They use the word conclusion. And so the conclusion that they might try to get him to is acknowledge that Joe Biden will be moving into the White House, but not admit that he won fair and square, which he did. And it's all about sort of positioning the president to still, as one of his allies put it, remain the center of attention. That's the goal. He wants to make money. He wants to stay in the media spotlight and remain relevant and potentially run in 2024. There's a lot of expectation that he will announce that he's going to do that. And some people think he will indeed run again in 2024. That's a little ways away, but it's all sort of a way of positioning the president to have an exit where he can save a little bit of face and not look like, as one of his aides told us, a loser.
And Carol, one of the other apparent agenda items for President Trump is pardons. Axios has two sources reporting this morning that Donald Trump will pardon Michael Flynn, who of course pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. You've covered the Michael Flynn story for a long time. I guess we shouldn't be terribly surprised by this.
No, not terribly surprised, Willie. Michael Flynn has been at the top of the president's list for a pardon for some time. Michael Flynn, it'll be 3 years ago on Tuesday, first pled guilty to lying to the FBI. That case has been through a saga all over the place, and now it's still sort of in limbo in court. And what's interesting about this is before President Trump lost the election, Michael Flynn and his lawyer, Sidney Powell, said that they didn't want a pardon, that they wanted to, Michael Flynn said he wanted to clear his name. He wanted the process to play out in court. And obviously the Justice Department had intervened to say that the case should be thrown out, but they wanted this to proceed. Now that President Trump is lost and he might not have that backstop in the coming months after the president leaves office, it looks like he'll be okay with pardon.
All right, NBC's Carol Lee outside the White House this morning. Carol, thanks so much.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.